Hey everyone, we're going to be making Ropa Vieja today. I am going to be using almost 3 pounds of chuck roast beef and chipotle peppers and green chilies. So I'm going to start off with peeling the tomatoes, and the way I do this is by cutting a cross at the bottom of the tomatoes, and then we're going to put it in a pot with water. And you just want the water to cover the tomatoes. You're going to bring it to a boil and cook it for about 10 minutes. I did put a pinch of salt in it. We're going to unpeel the garlic, and we're using 4 cloves of garlic for this recipe. 2 of these are actually going to go into the pressure cooker with the meat, and for those 2 I'll cut it in half. The other ones are going to be used for when we're sauteing the meat, and we'll dice those up. So I've already separated the 2 halves for the pressure cooker, and then the other ones I'm going to go ahead and dice. So this recipe, nothing needs to be perfect, just chop it up as much as you can. I do like to get it as fine as I can, because I don't want chunks of garlic in the recipe. So we'll chop these up again as fine as you can and then separate it. I really like cooking like this though, where you just get all of your ingredients ready to go, because while you're cooking it just makes it so much easier to toss it in as you go and not having to stop and chop something. So what we're going to do next is the onion. So we're using 2 onions for this recipe. One of them is just going to be cut in half, and that's going to be also put in the water for the meat. The other one is going to be diced. So I like to cut it this way, where you cut into it a few slices and then you'll cut slices lengthwise into like little strips. And the reason I like it is because it's more consistent, and then I'm not just going around just chopping and chopping and chopping. So I really like making it like this. And I went ahead and slow down this part so you can actually see what I'm doing. So just be careful with your knife, especially if it's really sharp. You don't want to cut your hand, but have a good grip on the onion and just slice it lengthwise. And then once we start chopping it, you'll see how consistent the pieces are. And you can use this way for like everything, especially if you want like a chunky guacamole or something like that. You will have to chop the end pieces though. So just make sure that it's all as fine as you can make it, or however texture you like. I like my onion a little bit chunkier. I like seeing it in the plate, so this one I don't chop too fine. So next we're going to do the chipotle peppers, and I'm using 4 for this recipe, and only 4. So I'm not using any additional juice, and I'm not using extra peppers. And the reason why is because these are very flavorful. They have a smoky taste, and I just really want a hint of it. I don't want it to be the focus of the dish. So they're not, in my opinion, they're not that spicy, but the smokiness is what really has that flavor in it. I'm gonna go ahead and de-seed these because I feel like these seeds are a little bit harder. And then once I finish de-seeding them, I'm going to cut them lengthwise into strips and then put them on my plate. The next pepper is the green chilies, and I like these because they're already de-seeded, so half the work is already done for me. And I'm cutting these into strips as well. I did half it so that it was easier to make a more consistent strip. And these peppers, I'm just going to toss in with my chipotle peppers because I'm going to put them in the pan at the same time. So my tomatoes are ready. Again, you just want to boil these for about 10 minutes. They don't need to boil for very long. And as you can see, the skin has already started to peel off. So it makes it so much easier to peel instead of going in with a peeler. And yes, I've done that a lot of times. So these are very hot, so I would recommend waiting a couple of minutes before starting to chop it up. But it was a Sunday and I was a little short on time, so my poor hands just went with it. So I'm going to cut these in half and air it out, but I also need to cut the core out and where the stem was because the piece is a little bit hard. So I'm going to cut it lengthwise into strips, and then I will rotate it and then cut it into chunks. This doesn't have to be perfect at all, just dice it up as much as you can and get all of the juices. And it's really important not to leave the juice behind because that's going to really help you when you're deglazing your pan. So make sure to get everything into your plate. So here's the lard. I didn't have this pictured, but I got this at Abuela's Carniceria here in St. Pete. You can get it at your local Latin market. I use these a lot for like chicharrones or anything like that. So in my pressure cooker, I'm putting in the onion and the garlic, and then we're going to put in the meat. My pot already has some water in it, but not too much because I need to make sure that it doesn't overflow. In this pan, I'm also going to put some salt, but we're going to cook it for 45 minutes on medium. And once it's done, we're going to go ahead and take it out and start to shred it. So when I was a kid, I would help my mom out with this, and it was my favorite thing, and I feel like it was my favorite thing because I would get a snack out of it when I was helping her, which did not make her too happy, but it was fun. It was a good memory. So I'm using a fork or forks to shred it because the meat is still hot. So it's an easy way to do it. Otherwise, we usually use our hands, especially when there's some fat chunks in it. You want to get all of the meat. So I'm going to go ahead and separate it so that we can start cooking it. So here's the broth. Use your broth, save all your broth. We're going to use some for the meat, but you can use it for rice or any recipe that calls for broth. Homemade broth is the best. So I've already heated my pan, and I'm going to go ahead and add the lard. And that was 2 tablespoons of lard. And in here we're going to add the onion. I want to cook the onion until it becomes translucent, and that can take you about 4 minutes or so, 4 to 5. And I also really want to make sure that the onions are integrated with the lard. Once that's ready, I'm going to go ahead and put in the meat. And here's where you really want to stir like crazy because you don't want it to stick to the pan, but you do want the flavor to come out and for it to become a little brown and a little crispy. So after that, we'll put in the garlic and cook that for a minute or 2. And after you've cooked that, you're going to put in the tomatoes and the chipotle, peppers, and the green chilies. And so here's where the tomato juice is really going to be helpful to you because it's going to help deglaze the bottom of your pan. So as you can see, I'm really getting in there and making sure that that bottom is now integrated very well with the meat because that has really great flavor. So you really don't want to miss out on deglazing it and getting it all mixed together. So that cooked for about 10 minutes, and now I'm adding the broth, and it's going to cook for another 15 minutes with the broth. After that, it's done. You do want to check to make sure the salt is good. I did add salt, which isn't pictured, but just test it out and add however much you like. So on my other pan, I'm making rice. So I like to saute my rice in olive oil until it gets to a sandy texture. So what I mean by that is where it's more granular and separated. It usually takes me about four minutes to do that. And I add salt, and then I'll add the broth that we made, and I'll bring it to a boil. After it's been boiling, I let it go back to a simmer and cook it for 12 minutes and then let it rest afterwards. So here's the finished product. I really hope that you like the video. Let me know how it goes for you. I look forward to making more.